Hello? All right, are you ready? All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much, and thanks to David and Teddy who made it possible for us to come here, and the whole GMGC team that set up not only this panel but the whole conference. In addition, thank you for the panelists who traveled from near and far to be here today. Before we start, I would also introduce myself and tell a little bit about why we actually have this topic here today. My name is Robin Kiera. I have been working in startups and large corporations, and during this time I witnessed awesome teams that achieved impossible goals and really surprised everybody. And on the other hand, I saw cross-company corporations and teams of senior executives, senior experts that headed right to failure. And the big question is why and what can we learn from our panelists and experts here on stage, how to build great teams. But maybe before we go there, you guys want to say a little bit about yourself.
Hello? Yeah, that works. My name is Patrick Gross. I'm originally from Germany. Currently, I'm working in France for the headquarters of Bandai Namco. But I have to say that I'm not here on behalf of Bandai Namco today. So everything I'm saying is my own words and my personal feelings. And I've been working as an HR manager first, then games researcher, then product strategist, and now I'm business and product analyst. And most of these kind of jobs I've done in the games industry, mainly focusing on free-to-play and mobile games. Nowadays also having a strong focus on console and PC AAA games. So that's about me.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kadri, and I am from GameFounders. So I'll tell you a few words about GameFounders to kind of put my reason for being on this panel in a context a bit. So GameFounders is a games accelerator. We work with teams all over the world. So we look for especially younger indie teams with very good vision and potential on the market. And we choose the best ones, and they work together for 3 months in one place from all different places in the world. And we do invest in them, and we connect them with publishers. So that's why I have personally seen over a few thousand indie teams and work with around 70. So that's my experience for this panel.
Hello, I'm Tony Zander. I'm VP of Product Development at Vectr Ventures. I'd say we're an early stage VC, very interested in the gaming sector. So hope to meet some of you guys later.
Hey, good day. My name is Patrick Wilkens. I've been working in the games industry and leading teams since around 10 years, 7 of those in China, Beijing, with local and international gaming companies here. And the last 3 years I'm with Good Game Studios, working out of Hamburg, working on SLG games. After work I also organize a networking event, game industry networking. And had the opportunity in those last couple of years to meet a lot of different teams and experts, and that's why I have a couple of things to say about this as well. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. During recent years, we have seen, I think almost throughout most industries, intense discussions about how to build great teams. And I have the impression that it comes down to 2 opposing views. One say, especially like traditional organizations, or you might call them fossil organizations, that strong top-down structures lead to most productivity and to guarantee a high productivity and great teams. Others argue, especially coming from the software development background, that we all should become more agile in order to be more productive and have better teams. Maybe you, Tony, since you as VC have seen so many different industries and companies, what is your take on this?
So I've personally worked in both types of organizations. The top-down structure, I experienced that at Microsoft after they bought our game in 1995. They absorbed us in. We brought our own team, our own style, our own culture, and then they quickly assimilated us into, let's say, the Borg, and it became top-down. Currently, what I'm seeing is I'm in the startup space. I see a lot of younger, smaller teams, and I do agree. It's an agile world. Generally you'll start a project, you'll get going, you'll get some traction. You potentially will get a publisher or an investor involved, and they could easily have you pivot your idea to something that's more in line with their goals. So if your team is not agile enough, your process is not agile enough, you'll stall generally, and then who knows where that'll go.
What do the others think?
Well, I think that probably both sides are right, but it depends on the industry and also depends on what is the product. Especially if you're thinking about games industry, all the game companies get started with 2 people and an idea usually, so it's really hard to build a top-down from there. But at the same time, if you're looking at platforms or already bigger established companies like Microsoft mentioned here, obviously it's easier for them to do it that way. But I mean, let's go back to the most successful game developer, Supercell, right? So they still also have very small teams that are individually working on different games, and it works really well. So I guess we just need to look at what works for each industry.
Yeah, I also believe so. It depends highly on the industry, like how your leadership style is, how the company culture is, but it also depends on what kind of department you're leading within a company. So I could imagine that also a company like Supercell or, well, other big free-to-play companies, which usually have to be very agile, have some departments which are having more like a top-down hierarchy, just depending on the job the department is responsible for, right?
All right. Well, coming from this somewhat broader discussion, my next question would be what is your concrete experience with being in great teams or building great teams, leading great teams? Maybe you can share some best practices. Maybe Patrick, you can tell us a little bit more about life at Bandai Namco and your other companies.
Yeah, well, at the moment at Bandai Namco, I must admit I'm not having so much of a team because I'm a lone wolf, basically, the only business analyst there in the headquarters. But I could tell you something about my time at Good Game Studios. I like to think back of that time mainly for my team, because I had an awesome team over there which was very international and very diverse. So we had people from Korea, from Japan, from China, and basically when I started up there in that team, we were only 2 people from Germany, being game researchers, so we were kind of deconstructing games. And we wanted to understand how products work in other kind of countries, especially in Asia, because those games were very foreign for us, of course, and we wanted to understand their success factors. So we hired people from Asia. And that was a great success for us, actually, and a great success for me personally, and a great success for the whole team and the whole company in the end. We had so many learnings thanks to these kind of windows to the Asian markets. We learned so much about the culture. And the best thing about having this within a team was that we actually created synergies out of this. So I had my German point of view or European point of view. They had their Korean, Chinese, Japanese point of view. And we mixed it together and understood the whole global market way better than before. And I believe this was a key for having a great strategic advantage compared to other companies. So that was one of my greatest team experiences I had so far, and what I have learned the most of, basically.
I could reiterate on that. The cross-discipline, cross-culture teams generally come up with very globally viable products. I was lucky enough to, like I said, I worked at Microsoft. We were building some research projects out of whether it's Seattle, Beijing, Tokyo, and when you combined all those teams together, we actually were able to innovate some some unique experiences that then didn't need to be culturalized or localized as much, because it brought each person's personality or cultural differences together into one experience.
I think both is actually possible. We have been in the past, especially in China, working with homogeneous teams, mainly Chinese people, and also have been able to create great results. I think one of the important things for those kind of diverse teams is to take a lot of different disciplines into the team and be open and able. I think then as a manager what you need to do is you need to be more a facilitator. And I think being a facilitator becomes even more important when you go towards Europe, where it seems that empowerment, ownership of the game or ownership of the product is a more important driver for success. And I think with empowerment and with ownership, one of the best structures that actually facilitates that is a flat hierarchy and an agile way of working, where you let the team come up with most of the ideas. And I think for the years that I've been again in Europe, that seems to be the best model and one of the models I actually do prefer.
I would just add that for me the best experience in a team, and also I think what makes a very successful team is to be humble and to want to learn, because that's something that always brings the team forward and it brings the individuals forward and it creates a really nice synergy inside the same team. So I think if the previous answers were very kind of like from a bigger organization perspective who already is international, then I'm sure there's a lot of indies also in this room trying to take something away. So I think this is the main point, to always be open to new ideas and to learning, and to be humble about what you know and what there is still to learn.
Thank you very much. So we heard two concrete tools, being humble and living flat hierarchies. Do you have maybe in addition some tools people can take home and try out when it comes to how to build awesome teams?
I think one of the important things is also to identify talent, right? What you would need is a very strong analytics in one form or the other. I mean, we've seen, and recently in the market, a lot of analytics platforms that actually look at the performance of the product now, not so much on the performance of the team, and I would actually love to have a couple of more of those tools available. But again, if I look at the efficiency and the performance of a product, I can also look therefore at the performance of the team, and I think that's something that nobody should forget. Just putting out a game or any kind of product without really the definition of success, I think, is one of those things, right? You need to give a goal and also reevaluate this goal constantly to identify if you have that great team that you think you have.
And may I add, the goal needs to be the goal of each team member. For basically, it should be their intrinsic motivation to reach that goal, and not a goal which is just given by a leader and they should just achieve it. Well, of course, it's kind of necessary for a leader to give some kind of goals, but he should always make sure that this is actually the goal of the team, to have their motivation and their engagement with it, basically.
I'd follow on to that, where if we're looking for keywords, I would say passion. Passionate people ship product. They know that they're there because they want to be there. They know that it's not a 9-to-5 job. And as any of you guys know, if you're truly building games, it's definitely an all-in affair.
And when you're mentioning passion, I would also like to add trust. This is something very important. Trust among the team members, communication. If you're having communication, you will most likely also have the trust within the team. Well, and passion.
And would it be, for example, to have regularly retrospective meetings, not only related to the product, but also related to how you work together to create the product? Would that be also a tool you would recommend?
I think all these very specific tools are always dependent on the team and the culture and everything. You know, maybe in some countries it's more of a tradition to do, like, you know, stand-ups or regular meetings or something. But if the team is very small and people are speaking to each other anyway every day around the same table, then maybe sometimes it's kind of like the flow that brings it forward, and you just have a checkpoint every week or something. So I think that there are like a number of tools out there on the market, but it always depends on the goal and the team and the kind of structure that they have. If they're in the same place, if they're working remotely, that is very much the case these days with the talent all around the world. So I think the tools are always very, very individual, but definitely there needs to be some kind of points where the team comes together and realize if they're still on the same page or not.
Yeah, you just mentioned that it's a good thing when people sit together and have the communication flow all the time. I would absolutely agree to that. I've noticed that when people are only like 5 meters from each other, then the communication flow is already kind of broken. And sometimes, even if they are sitting on the same table, you don't have proper communication going on there. And if a leader sees that, then that person should definitely do something about it, like a perspective meeting or something like that, or a daily stand-up, or at least a weekly sync meeting or something like this, I believe.
So I take away there's not one fits all strategy or fixed tool set or checklist, but that you individually have to come up with a solution for your team and your situation. Great. Well, we talked now a lot of best practices and how to achieve great teams, but maybe let's switch to the other side of it. And sometimes you have the situation, you have a team where you have a great individual with depth, technology, knowledge, or who's really, really good at creating content in his industry, but who actually does not fit into the team or the culture of the company. What should you do?
Personally, if you have somebody that doesn't fit culturally, you cut them out like a cancer. One bad team member delivering bad attitude, just a bad morale team will destroy the product. I've seen great guys come in. I mean, world-renowned guys that could come in and write code in a weekend that other guys would take a month. But personality-wise, he didn't fit, and it just didn't scale long-term. But then I've seen the other hand where 10 moderately good, mediocre guys come together. They're very passionate. They build the product, they ship the product, and they're able to be successful.
Yeah, I would say, in general, of course, I would agree with Tony. If somebody doesn't fit in your team, that's obviously a problem, but you also need to look at the size of your team, right? I mean, the smaller you are as a company, the more the individual is important. I mean, we've seen, if we would use like an example of sports or football, closer to home in Germany. I mean, if you have a great player, you can build a team around that particular player, right? And then you have to adjust, but you need to know what that kind of costs are for the company. So you should never ignore that. And when you then make a conscious decision saying, okay, I have a person that, culturally not necessarily fits in my team, but, after looking at all sides, I still think we can build a small team around it. Go ahead. On the other hand, then if you try to scale, yeah, that's probably where it stops and what you should have considered before, right? You're not going to build a 1,000 people team around like one, brilliant but slightly awkward guy.
I think it even doesn't always have to be a technical skill that kind of genius has, or there are always people that are not 100% good fit. So, I think, of course, I do agree that if there is like no fit at all, you should cut it, but I still think there is a process between that, before that, where you kind of find out like what is the problem. Because I personally had this experience with one of the people in our teams that it wasn't really working out. Like things were not getting done, and there was a lot of kind of tension in the team and everything. And we just sat down and we started to figure out like what is the problem. And at the end of the day, we figured out that there were like 2 small tasks that were just not acceptable or wasn't making that person feel good, and we just changed a bit the job profile, and that turned into like one of the best employees. So in that sense, I think before kind of like the harsh cuts, I'm sure that every lead needs to do their homework and figure out, is the problem actually that it's like a personality trait, or is it a lack of skill, or is it maybe just you can tweak a bit some of the job description. So I'm the softie here. I'm not cutting people so fast.
No, but I think you're right. There you're coming back to the communication point, actually. Just make the communication clear, and maybe you solve the problem. The problem solves itself, maybe. So one other thing I would like to add to this topic in particular is that I would try to avoid hiring that kind of person at all. Back in 2012, I was working in Shanghai for a logistics company as an HR manager, and I created an appraisal form for the new candidates. And one of the actual most important point we had to check at the very first, does that person fit the company culture? And if that was not given, doesn't matter how good that person was, doesn't matter how genius that person was, we did not hire him. That was my recommendation as an HR manager at that time.
Well, we heard now the different stages in the process of dealing with such a situation, from hiring to coaching to also letting go. I think it's a mix of different instruments. My question is, but how at all do you notice? Because when you have maybe a situation that's problematic, or you have a true a problem somewhere, how do you as a people manager notice, because you don't know the people so well as the whole team members?
I think at the end of the day, everybody is just people. So if people are frustrated, then they react somehow. Like either they say something to somebody, or they start talking to other people, or like you still notice, or things are not getting done, or it's not like either time-wise or quality-wise, it's not what you agreed, or like all these small things. It's kind of very obvious, especially in small teams. Of course, in bigger teams, it's kind of easier to, put a nice little rug on it and you don't really notice. But I think it's still coming down to, you see the frustration in people, and that's what you want to kind of get in the bud, so you don't let it go too fast.
I think one of the first signs there is actually when people don't have lunch together, as an example, or maybe a beer in the evening or something like that. This is already something like, my alert goes on then already when I see something like this.
Yeah,
Does it mean that you are spying on all of your employees where they have lunch and beer?
No, but I have lunch with them, and I will notice, of course.
I think one of the important things is indeed, depending on the size of the company, when I look back at a team of 45 people that I was leading, of course you don't lead anybody directly, right? You then have, depending on the hierarchy within your company, in my case we had around 8 people that were very talented to lead the rest of those 45 people, and I think you need to be very clear. It goes back to vision, it also goes back to accountability and to the ability of identifying the performance of your product and your people. So again, you should have some performance KPIs available that help you to identify whether or not the team works well, and if the team doesn't work well, then what's the issue? Possibly a person that doesn't fit. And then again, you have the opportunity to do something about it.
What kind of KPIs were you thinking about?
Well, I do think on the more of the hard side, I think the time to ship, for example, and the cost of failure. How many hours of QA, for example, do you have to invest? How many times or how many regression bugs are in your code? I mean, it doesn't help if you ship every week and then basically spend another month to fix a version that you just shipped. That would be a very important performance KPI. I do think that one of those retrospective meetings that you can have every 2 weeks or every 2 months, depending on your company style, could also be important. Like happiness of the employee, obviously, the more emotional it gets, the harder it gets to measure. So I normally like to stick to a bit easier to measure KPIs.
Something which is also easy to measure, and this is kind of an HR secret here, sick leave actually is an indicator for motivation. I know many people don't like to hear that, but if you see that the sick leave is increasing, especially in big teams, that doesn't count so much for smaller teams, but in very big teams or big companies, if the sick leave is increasing, this is a strong indicator for demotivated people.
All right, thank you very much. So far we have talked especially about teams inside of companies, but teams do not only consist out of people working at a company. We also have teams from different companies at VCs, at accelerators, or joint ventures. So, Kadri, you as CEO of GameFounders, a renowned accelerator, what do you think about best practices when working with cross-company teams?
Well, I think that what we have seen ourselves during the 5 years that we have been working with this is a lot of the times, the teams that we're working with, especially if they're from countries that does not have a very developed and very active ecosystem in games, they almost feel like, you know, they're like an island. They're the 2 or 3 or 5 people, and they're somewhere, and they don't really have anybody to ask from, and they don't really have anything. So putting these people together, like let's say usually we have around 10 teams for 3 months. So they always learn from each other because everybody's using the same game engines. Everybody's, publishing on the same platforms. Everybody's doing the same types of games, the same analytics and the same KPIs, what they're struggling with. So it's really fun to kind of see how they become kind of like a family. We kind of call it the GameFounders family. So they start helping each other. And so if somebody is already really good at Unity and somebody else is not, then you know, maybe sometimes a third person knows, and they put them together. So it creates a kind of like an ecosystem of its own. So feeling that you belong somewhere, that you belong in the industry, that there are many people who are having the same, you know, issues is something that we have seen really increasing the motivation of the teams as well. So that they kind of feel that, you know, we're on the right track, and you get verification, maybe not from your own, but from other people's experiences, either their failures or successes. So this is actually very important, and I think that's also why a lot of the countries are also building their own ecosystems, because that also makes this kind of a feeling of belonging somewhere.
I think in terms of outside experience, smart money, I think is one of the buzzword or the keywords, right? Just getting funding is great if you know everything already and just need money to scale. But many of us we don't know everything, right? So having somebody and if we see as an opportunity there, of course, to give us experience, we should definitely use it. And on the other hand, talking a bit about networking, obviously something that I'm in my after work hours I'm very passionate about, doing the game industry networking. I've been doing it, or we're still doing it in Beijing, for example, and it's one of the best experiences that I have, because there are so many, driven, so many smart people here. And seeing everybody come together like once a month or once a quarter and then really exchange openly about, their failures. You'll see that one day they talk about the failures, and then maybe a year or a couple of months later they talk about their successes, and then everybody starts sharing in. So I think the cities and the environments, I heard from, for example, Finland, that also does it very actively. I think the best companies come from cities where the intercompany exchange, same as Kadri also mentioned, is very vibrant, is very well accepted.
But what is the secret sauce of making sure that there is an atmosphere of trust where you share insights and that you don't get an atmosphere of competition?
I think it's the same as in any industry. It's kind of like idea versus execution. So if you have the idea, it's always going to be kind of your baby and your vision, and it's very difficult for somebody to kind of like steal it and carry out the exact same thing in execution. And I think, as you mentioned Finland, like Finland is a very perfect example of this. Everybody is so open about everything, and they're sharing every detail. If you just go and ask, you get a straight answer down to numbers and everything, because they know that, I mean, especially in the games industry, it's not like you just do the same thing and then you have the same success. Otherwise, we would all be superstars here, right?
And how do you make sure in your team situation, when you have 10 different teams, that there's an atmosphere of family and helping each other, and not competition, for example, for next step funding?
Well, I think that there is very clear understanding that there are different options for follow-on deals based on your genre and platform and game and everything. So in that sense, it's not really ever a competition in that sense. But like what we do to kind of like create the whole environment very fast during the 3 months is that in the first week we always have some kind of like a team building event. So we have gone like rafting in the Malaysian jungles, or we have gone to some kind of like random semi-extreme things, so that during that time, like in the first week already, people are already helping each other, not in a job kind of related way, but personally, and building these relationships. And after that, it's kind of very, very easy for them to do. And the second thing is also because everybody's away from their home country. So you don't have your dog to walk, you don't have your mother to, calm down if something is wrong, or you don't have your friends or something. I mean, it sounds heartless, but that is actually also what bonds people, because these people are immediately your friends, and it brings forward. But yeah, that's how it works.
I think if you're talking about two things. One is within companies, and one is, like accelerators, or also, intercompany communication. I would say in terms of intercompany communication, one thing is to be able to kind of establish some ground rules. I mean, when we, for example, with Game Industry Networking, we started in the beginning, it was like 10 people meeting in Sanlitun, where most of the foreigners hang out, and out of this like core group, it kind of grew up. We had a couple of times we had 250 people, and I think it was always like this kind of like no bullshit environment that I appreciated, and people felt, because they knew each other. I think in this situation that Kadri explained is similar, right? Like you go out so often with different companies that they kind of become also friends, and you do not waste their time by talking about, oh yeah, my company is the best company and we just grew. You kind of explain not the what but the how. And within the company, I think what's very important is that you set very clear goals. I mean, competition normally also comes because of, intransparent goals, and people think they have to compete to achieve something. And if you set them up so that they know that with competition is always good in a healthy environment. But competition does not have to mean that you build yourself like an information silo. I think if you're smart and if you know what you're doing and you feel that you have a competitive advantage, it doesn't really matter how much information you share, because, you can't be copied that easily anyway.
And in the end, if you share a lot, you also receive a lot, and there's one day you will get this one idea that will help you in your particular situation. Well, another interesting criteria when it comes to team situation, I think, is our regional and cultural differences. And since we're in China, my question to you here on the stage is, what should Chinese managers keep in mind when managing teams, for example, from Western markets, and what should managers from Europe and the US or Latin America keep in mind when they manage Chinese teams? Patrick, you have been living in China for quite a while, so maybe you want to start?
Yeah, obviously it's a bit pressure having so many Chinese, so I hope you're not just shaking your heads right now with the foreigner perspective of how foreigners should work in China, or how Chinese should work in foreign countries. I mean, one of the things that I always did in the very early years, I was like, hey guys, I was always openly encouraging participation, feedback and brainstorming meetings. And at least for me, from my experience, I did not feel that was the necessarily best approach. I do feel that, again, there was 2008 until 2013, things might have changed, but I always felt that as a leader, you're supposed to have a vision, and you're supposed to have most of the answers. So being, the person that asks a lot of questions back can, in some teams, also establish some kind of fear and insecurity. So I would say within China, it would be good to provide a lot of answers. And if you encourage questions within the teams, not necessarily brainstorming with yourself in the leadership position. One of the things that I had to learn when going to Europe in 2013, I joined Good Games in Hamburg. My teams kept asking me why all the time, like, why you want me to do that? And in previous years, it was enough to say, well, because I want you to do that. That's my answer. Do it. But that changed, and you had to explain much more. So I would say the amount of empowerment, the amount of information that you should convey to your team sometimes feels unnecessary to oneself. But if you want to build great teams, and if you want to have empowered teams, I think you can't communicate enough. You can't explain why you're doing things enough and what the ultimate outcome is. I think that's one of the most important things, and then maybe one of the differentiations between working in China and working in Europe, at least for myself.
I'd say one of the biggest learnings for me coming to China was I ran very large successful game team at Microsoft. I thought I knew how to make games. They sent me to China, and I get here on the ground, and I learned firsthand how important holiday and Chinese New Year is here, and didn't plan my schedule properly, and had my first failure. So I'd say as a Western manager, when you go to new culture, definitely do a little homework before you show up.
I don't really have a China-specific answer to this, but in general, cultural teams in Europe, Asia, and US, I think it's very important to be sure that everybody is heard. Because what we see a lot is, especially the American and also the European team, tend to be more vocal about what their ideas are and all that. And sometimes the teams from the Asian region are they need a bit more encouragement, or they need other people to shut up so that they could start talking. So I think as a manager, it's very important to kind of see that everybody gets their voice out and everybody is heard, and so that everybody feels as a part of the team.
So I have a very little story to share with you. It's about a Taiwanese girl working for, she was working for Good Game Studios, but she was on my team. We had one team building event, and we were exchanging a lot of thoughts during that event, like some kind of workshops where we were talking about actually criticizing each other and these kind of things. We were talking about what we don't like about the working styles of the other people or of the whole team, and how we could improve that together. And for her, that was a very unique situation. And in the end of that workshop, she was actually crying. And I asked her, why are you crying? And she said she just found it beautiful to be able to talk that openly and to find constructive solutions by actually criticizing each other. And this is the first time where I actually realized that maybe this is something which you don't do so much in China, like criticizing each other and trying to find constructive solutions for that, from that, basically. But I understand that it can be very difficult sometimes. You need to have a team which just doesn't take it personally if you criticize each other in order to be successful with something like this.
Yeah. I'd also say on top of that is transparency. When you're on a team, it's better to voice out early if you're behind, rather than coming up. This goes back to the communication that we were talking about. It talks about culture. It's the trust. If you're bought into the team, everyone will understand. They're seeing what you do every day.
And I think that takes one of the examples that we heard also about, what Chinese managers could keep in mind when going to Europe. I think a lot of the examples that we just brought up is kind of the best practice that we feel works best, mostly also in Europe, and that we of course try to establish, at least for myself as well, in China. But again, seeing, and that goes back to what's your company qualities, what's your company's culture. I mean, there's again many ways that lead to awesome games, as we've seen. So again, think about the best fit for your company, and then make the decision on how you want to lead your team.
Well, you see a lot of differences between the regions. We heard in concrete examples. My last question would be: there is a saying that says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." What's your take on this when it comes to build great teams?
I'm a strong proponent of culture. I've worked on teams where we worked together, we played together, we basically built a dorm out of our office, and we lived there. We did everything together. The culture we fostered was almost like we were family. Everyone trusted that you were going to do what you said, and it ended up in a very positive game and positive exit.
I think one of the important things, in my opinion, is each company has a goal, or should have a goal, and this goal obviously should be well thought out. The next step then would be to make sure that the teams follow the goals of the company. And what many people, I think, miss is that every person coming to work also has a goal, and this goal does not necessarily has to be, okay, my company is doing an exit, or, you know, my company is becoming, you know, part of the Fortune 500. You know, their goal might be, I want to do an awesome 3D character. Their goal might be, I want to just, you know, code away and have nobody bothering me. As an example, so what you should really do, or what I always try to do, is to combine the goals of each individual with the team goals and then with the company goals. And I think through this one there comes also some sort of a culture. And this culture then aligned with strategic goals could really be supporting each other rather than being against each other, which happens all too often. And that's normally the first sign of a company failing in the short and the long term.
I would say both culture and strategy. At some point, they come from the lead of the team. So the lead can mess up the culture, the lead can mess up the strategy if neither is done correctly. But if both are done well, then it's not really that possible to do that. So, I mean, I think that that it always depends on who is leading the team. Either it's a specific manager, or if it's kind of like a co-working team that just allocates the responsibility to somebody. But I think both of these things are kind of like the problem, so to say, of the lead.
And how can a lead mess up a culture?
Well, maybe if they're not clear enough in their communication, or if they are not paying attention to the specific needs of people that are making up the team, or if they are not looking at the market properly. I mean, you can have a lot of different ways to do that, but I think at the end of the day, it still comes down to leading the team.
Well, I believe, to get back to your question, that a culture is something lived by the people. It's a shared mindset, basically. While a strategy is something you give to the people, so basically something extrinsic, some kind of extrinsic motivation given to a team. So that would mean that the culture itself is more intrinsic. But if you give, if people have an intrinsic motivation and you give something, some extrinsic motivation to it, you will have a over-justification effect. That means it will just push away the intrinsic motivation of the team if the strategy is not aligning with the company culture, at least. So my recommendation in such kind of case would be understanding your company culture and creating a strategy around this, instead of just giving a strategy to people who are already living their culture. Or create a strategy first and then hire the right people who can fit that strategy with their culture, basically.
Yeah, I think one of the important things is self-awareness of the leader. I love this sentence, my door is always open. And the question people should ask themselves, is it though, right? I mean, the sentence itself already suggests a lot of things, right? First, it's my door. That means I do have an office somewhere, and you don't. It means that it's always open, and it's my decision to keep it open. It's not your decision to come in, right? Like I invited you to my office, and I think this situational, also social awareness of a leader is important. That you have no disconnect. I think really you need to lead by example, and some comments that you think might be funny or that might help, could well alienate your team. So there needs to be, a lot of questions you have to ask yourself in the end of the day. Is it really like the picture that I have of myself, is it that the picture that everybody else in my team has as well? And if it's not, well, then you need to adjust, that's for sure.
How do you notice?
Well, it's a good question. I would have to ask the teams. I mean, I obviously have this picture in my head of this awesome manager that is open to everybody's suggestion and makes everybody happy. But I'm quite sure that some people go home and say, well, that's not the case. So I really try hard to open or have an environment where everybody feels able to make a comment. And I think one of the very famous sentences was, I want everybody to be honest, even if it costs them the job. And I think if you're able to establish this, it's much easier to identify whether or not you are this leader that you think you are.
Okay, well, wow. This has been exciting panel. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, your ideas, your openness. And I personally take away 3 things. The first thing is that there are a lot of tools out there, a lot of solutions out there, and there's not a one-fits-all solution. I think this is one thing I take away. The second thing I take away is, and I'm really happy about it, that we also talked about situations that are not rainbow and sunshine, but challenging. And I felt a bit like, thank God I'm not alone. You know, we have all been there, done that, and I think this is really, really reassuring. But third and foremost, what I take away is that it's actually possible to build great teams, that it's possible to build out of a mix of people, for example, where you with your 10 teams or in game developing companies or in the VC situation, to build great teams, may it be inside of company, may it be between companies, and I thank you guys for creating this vision too. So thank you, and of course also thank you here to the audience for listening. We are happy to answer your questions right after the panel, and we are also happy to share our social media contacts with you if you have feedback for us or questions later down the road. And well, thank you very much, and we are happy to see you next time too.
Thank you, Robin.
Such precision.